In the Reins, a novel. Written by Kade. Narrated by Amanda Lamb. Prologue. The anger came later as I drove wildly, blindly, furiously down the expressway, going 90 in a 70. My hot tears pooled at the corner of my eyes before overflowing into rivers streaming out across my mascara-stained cheeks. The painted pavement lines streaked and blurred across the road before me. It wasn't Michael that had me in a rage. It was my life. I found myself assessing the last 28 years of it, and I couldn't remember a time when I felt happy, complete. I strained my aching mind, searching its recesses for something that could make me feel whole. It wasn't men. It certainly wasn't being engaged to a dream man, as my friends had called him. It wasn't my career, although I'd always wanted to be a writer. It wasn't moving away from home. It wasn't living in another state or being in the big city. I scoured my mind for some trace of anything that really, really made me happy. Blank. Was I having a pre-midlife crisis? I nodded to myself. Probably. The researcher in me temporarily cast aside. I didn't even know where I was wildly driving to, just far away from there and from him. That was all I knew. The turn of events replayed in my mind. I gripped the wheel tighter and pressed the pedal harder. Chapter 1. I'm through, and I'm leaving, I said flatly. Where do you think you're going? Michael countered, catching me by the crook of my arm, eyeing the pulled-out, empty drawers of my dresser. I found this, I replied, emotionless, wiggling myself out of his grasp and tossing the piece of crumpled paper I'd been clutching onto the hardwood floor beside his shiny, Prada-wielding feet. I delivered this discourse with a certain calm, more so than I imagined I would have, after pacing our studio apartment and waiting for him to come home. I always knew something wasn't quite right between us. There never was that fire in our relationship that lit me up and made it impossible for me to live without his touch. I believed that sort of burning desire between a man and woman was possible all my life. I was disappointed to the point of paralysis to not have found that with the man I intended to marry. All this time, and I never did anything about it. Until now. What is this? He retorted with a grunt, bending down to retrieve the ball of shame from the floor. I watched his eyebrows crease and form a V as he reread the delicate handwriting that wasn't my own. He didn't look at me. I didn't want him to. We weren't meant to be, I said, glazing my embarrassment at finally acknowledging it. I placed my 2-carat pillow-cut engagement ring, reflecting brilliance in the overhead lighting, on the nightstand. Without remorse, I turned my back to him and lifted my bags off the plush king-size bed that we'd never share again. Luckily, I didn't have much to pack. I'd made a habit of living life light. I decided in college that I didn't want material things to weigh me down. I was committed to investing in the expansion of my mind rather than my possessions. Never did I think that, in the end, it would be a person who kept me tied down. In this moment, though, I felt surprisingly free, surprisingly not angry, and surprisingly glad that fate had found a way for me to get out of this lackluster relationship. Fate always did that for me. It always extracted something from my life and replaced it with another choice to make before I allowed myself to circle the ring, prepared for the emotional beat-up. I'd known that I didn't want to be with Michael for a long time. I just kept hoping that something or someone would change. It became glaringly obvious. I had to be that change. Devin, let's talk about this, he said, his lovely brown eyes showing only a hint of conscience. I'd always hated that about him. He could never fully admit that he was in the wrong. He was able to justify his actions every single time, at least in his own mind, and I'd forgive him every time. He always took my breath away, looking at me, seducing me with those lovely brown eyes. Mud. His eyes are the color of mud. Michael, don't. Neither of us wants this. I feel it. I know you do too. Let's not fight. Not tonight. Not anymore. Just let me go. I didn't beg or plea. This was a matter of fact. Where will you go, Devin? He sneered. I don't know. I shut the door behind me gently, knowing it was the last time I would walk through it. I sighed and took my first step toward change. Chapter 2. Wake up! Lost in thought, I failed to acknowledge the sea of red lights in front of me because I was reliving the past, pedal forced flat, physically going forward but mentally going backwards, excelling my mind in rewind. Brake lights flashed from every direction, and in the distance, an 18-wheeler veered across all 3 lanes of the expressway. I snapped out of my head into action just in time to jerk the steering wheel to the right off the blacktop, and into the dirt patch on the side of the road. I missed the car ahead of me by millimeters. I threw my whole self against the steering wheel, my shoulders slumped, tears burning the corners of my eyes, searching for breath. My stomach a nervous knot. What the heck, Devin? You have a breakup on your hands, not a death wish. Finding the will to gather myself, I wiped my puffy eyes with the heel of my hand, staining the cuffs of my white shirt with mascara, and looked up. There it was. Fate. Again. It was knocking on my door, ringing my doorbell. Ding, ding, ding. There I sat, black, streaked down my face, spun out on the side of the road, dust still settling around my car, focusing on what sprawled out in front of me. Shock and awe took hold as I let my vision adjust through the dirty windshield. There before me, several horses were grazing in a lush meadow speckled with lavender clover, just a yard or 2 from the fence in front of me. A few of them took notice and picked up their heads, ears pricked forward, contemplating my little car idle on the side of the road. My mind burst awake in an instant. I felt alive in a way that I hadn't felt in years, having run my car off the side of the road, avoiding a freak accident, and now staring out into a field of horses. Suddenly, I was aware. I was back in my apartment in the city, rereading my brainstorming journals, taking note of the millionth time I'd scrawled, "I will have a horse again," across the top of one of my writing projects. I was conscious of all the times I'd aimlessly doodled a horse on pieces of scrap paper while I was on the phone with a friend from back home, sipping red wine in the wee summer night hours. I was a child again, 5, 6, 7, 10 years old, playing with model horses in the bathtub, taking riding lessons at the local farm, joining a 4-H club, begging my parents for a horse for years, and then, shockingly, receiving one for my birthday. Yes, my parents provided the perfect childhood mount. It was fate. The universe, my universe, had spoken and heaved me in front of this random horse pasture in my desperate, frantic, altered life reevaluation state. I reflected back to being a teenager, lost among my peers, and in the midst of my parents' divorce, feeling completely incomplete, until I was out of the barn, riding my horse. My childhood horse silenced my doubt, that inner nagging voice, and lifted me out of the darkness for so many of my adolescent years. She taught me how to succeed, and gave me my first taste of success in our small town show ring. It occurred to me that when I sold cricket to move to the city, I lost part of myself, a part of me that I desperately missed, but locked deep down inside of me. I thought I wanted a career in the city writing fabulous articles for fabulous magazines. In the end, I had chosen to live where horses could not have a place in the feature story. In preparation for my new life, I had boxed up every trophy, ribbon, and picture, leaving cricket packed away from my heart in a basement back home. I walked with a blind eye past horses for hire in the park. I refused to watch movies about horses. I found myself welling with tears when I watched the Pegasus leap out and unfold its wings at the beginning of the DVDs I rented. I cried when I went to the Belmont Stakes and heard the roar of hooves down the racetrack. Horses. Horses made me happy. Complete. Then and there, in the middle of some state, in a wild state of being, I vowed I would own a horse again. With a new sense of direction, I steered my car back on the highway, gingerly maneuvered gaps in the traffic jam, boldly crossed the grassy median, and took the first exit south. Chapter 3. The choice to steer south set off a whirlwind of activity when I crossed the state line 2 months ago. First, I rented a small apartment and set up my office in the spare room. Being a writer afforded me great freedom. I cherished that I could write from anywhere and whenever inspiration struck me. My editor was only a speed dial away. I felt fortunate that I had a modest savings account that I hadn't told Michael about to fall back on, as my last project had been a moderate success. I had written a vegetarian diet cookbook, a companion piece to an article of mine that had been published in Organic Lifestyle magazine. I knew I could sustain my dream horse and myself for a decent amount of time until my next assignment came in. Once I was settled into a space of my own, I did what I do best. A writer knows how to research. So, I researched. I researched horse breeds and bloodlines on every equine website I could find. I watched lessons from top horse trainers and read every horse magazine under the sun. I frequented local tack shops, then I bought everything I knew I would need for my future horse online. You name it, I did it. I discovered a favorite website, www.heavensenthorse.com, and scoured through the sale ads, looking for something that would strike me. Time and time again, I found myself returning to the breed of my youth, the Western Pleasure Prospect. I sorted through what felt like thousands upon thousands of online ads for quarter horses, but in the end, it was the flair of the color breeds that I really loved. I found myself typing Palomino and Paint into the equine search engines. I knew fate would guide me again. I knew it was just a matter of time before fate would lead me to the right horse at the right time. I researched incessantly that second month, soaking everything in, putting everything I had out there, and nothing spoke to me. I did this for hours upon hours, day after day, staying up way too late and waking up way too early. I was a woman obsessed. I was so consumed that I didn't have time to think of Michael or the male species in general, and I was grateful for that. One particular morning, I swore off the whole empty search and sat down at my laptop with a steaming cup of aromatic coffee to work on an article I had been assigned for a women's magazine about eating organic. I was typing mid-sentence when one of my search engine alerts popped up, telling me new horses had been added to heavensenthorse.com that matched my criteria. I minimized the bubble and sat back. It had been a few days since any new horse ads had been posted to the site. I had browsed every horse within a 3-state radius and nothing had appealed to me. I took a long sip of my oversized coffee mug, swallowed, and inhaled deeply. Could this be it? I had plunged myself into the world of horses for the past 2 months and nothing had inspired me, especially not the fact that the value of a finished, well-trained horse had almost doubled in price since the days of my childhood. So much had changed. My mind went into overdrive and I started to reason with myself, debating the pros and cons of being in the market for a horse right now. It was all so different, and my research told me that I had so much to learn. This business of horses seemed foreign to me now that I was an adult. from the price of a good horse to the way I noticed people were riding. Things had evolved while I'd been busy building my life in the city. With a roll of my eyes and a defiant grunt, I shoved those thoughts to the back of my head and told the negative voices to quiet down. I knew what I wanted, and I wasn't going to talk myself out of this. I gulped the last of my light roast, a nice caffeine buzz settling in, and leaned forward, directing the mouse to the link in my inbox. The click took me to a single result. I'd had better days with nearly 50 overpriced horse pictures staring back at me, but today, this one ad took me by surprise. It didn't feature a picture and only had a solitary line of text. It read, "Cute paint with a great personality, $1,800, must sell." No way. The horses I'd been looking at were all priced well over $7,500. For a mere $1,800, my assumption was that this horse must be scary looking or ill or half dead or worse. Then I looked at the address. It was stabled only 20 minutes from my apartment. Intrigued, I read further, and below the ad, it listed bloodlines. Because of my diligent research, I recognized the quality immediately. I was astonished at the beyond reasonable price on this animal. There had to be something wrong with it. I tilted my head in contemplation and looked out the window. Or could this be fate calling? I picked up my cell and dialed the number. Chapter 4. 2.5 months after leaving Michael and the big city, I found myself walking into a stranger's barn and paying for a horse, sight unseen. Most horse people would call me crazy. Invitations Sealed with a Kiss was her registered name, but they called her Faith. She was a bright, spirited young paint mare, and I fell in love with her instantly. She was incredibly pretty, with bay and brown patches over white puzzled across her body. Her coloring was referred to as Tobiano, so they told me. She had an abstract heart-shaped spot on her neck. These days, I was all about connection. I had it with Faith the moment she put her muzzle on my shoulder and blew warm breath in my ear. I knew I would never be in a relationship with human or animal that lacked connection again. I wasted 3 years of my life living a connectionless lie with Michael. With 30 lingering around the corner and a broken engagement on my resume, I realized, maybe for the first time, how clear it was that I only had this one wild, precious life. I intended to live it fully from here on out. Bring on the fear, bring on fully living. Devin Brooke, this is your time, your chance to change your ways. I want it all. All at once, I was a horse owner. I knew Faith was young and needed a lot of conditioning before I would have myself a finished show horse. But it was a journey I looked forward to, relished in. I knew that with hard work came great reward, and I knew that I had found the horse that would take me where I wanted to go. It had always been my dream for as long as I could remember to own a horse that had the talent to compete at a world-level horse competition. Fate whispered to me that Faith was just that horse. I trusted my instincts. They hadn't abandoned me during those years I had been away from the equine scene. I still knew a good one when I saw one. It came from a place innate in me. Or call it fate. As luck would have it, Faith's previous owners also agreed that we were a perfect fit. They even offered to continue to stable her until I was able to find a suitable facility. They kept the price tag on her board low, happy that she was going to a good home, not to mention the fact that I was reducing the size of their costly herd. Relieved that I had Faith safely stored for another month, I settled in at doing what a writer does best. Again, I researched. I asked everyone from tack shop clerks to feed store managers if they knew of any private barns in my area. I was in search of a peaceful environment, one without the chaos that comes with multiple horse owners boarding their horses under one roof. I needed a quiet place, off the beaten trail, almost a sanctuary, where I would have a chance to process, to think, to let the grunge of the city and Michael fall away from me. I needed to let the frenzy of a fast-forward life slip away. I wanted the slick the city left on my skin, my life, my soul, to melt away under the silence of a country horse farm. I wanted to experience lack of expectation and judgment as I bonded with my new mare, to see what I really remembered about being a horse owner, if anything at all, to be free of the scrutiny of other riders and the herds of gossipers that claim to be riders at upscale boarding facilities. In my search for the isolated space I craved, only one was brought to my attention, and I pulled into the driveway nervous. What if I were rejected by the owner for the thing I wanted most? What if I were turned away for the very same reason I sought this barn out? All I wanted was to be alone with my thoughts and my animal. Maybe they wanted that too, and that would make me the intruder. I knew I wanted to care for Faith myself. I wasn't expecting someone to do those chores for me. I needed to get dirty. Not city slick dirty, but earth dirty, hard work dirty. I wanted to know Faith, inside and out. I wanted to know how much water she drank during the day, how much feed it would require to put weight lost from training back on her, the nutritional content of the hay she received. I wanted to clean her stall and have the satisfaction of sweat running down my back, leaving salty, damp trails along my spine. I didn't want anyone to know her needs better than I did. I wanted to reconnect with my roots. I wanted to be a bona fide cowgirl this time around. I walked sheepishly from my car toward the establishment, passing up the temptation to drag my feet through the dirt. Once I crossed the threshold of the barn doors and moved into the cool shadows, I had to adjust my eyes. The transition from bright sunlight threw me off. In adjusted focus and upon first impression, the barn was quiet, almost lonely. And I knew it was exactly what I needed. I looked from left to right. The grand 20-stall barn stood almost empty. The lush pastures uninhabited, not a person in sight. As I pushed down the cement aisle, I heard a rustling in one of the box stalls and noticed a lone worker tending to the bedding. I asked him if the owner was available. He didn't lift his head to look at me as he motioned his pitchfork. "Over there," he said, under his breath. I looked in the direction of his tines and saw in the distance, at the top of a lush hill of green grass, a woman perched at a picnic table under the shade of a large tree, wearing a big, floppy hat. I said nothing more to the stable hand as I turned and glanced again around the stable. The space gave me the lingering sense that something good had happened here, but was since long gone. As staff emerged from the shadows, their soft half-smiles were those of the ones who were left to tend the ghostly premises. Their eyes seemed all-knowing, but their voices I knew would not be telling. I felt like they might be protecting something, afraid of something, longing for something. I didn't need to know their story. If I could bring Faith here, I would respect them and their silences, as somehow I knew they would do the same for me. Whatever happened here, I would leave them to their secrets and their silences, to mind myself, and occupy only my small space. I even felt compelled to share in the sadness of the place. I would linger between the rustle from the stalls and the billow of the breeze. I would become part of the silence. I would enjoy the quiet peace here that only nature dares breach. I wanted to disappear, to be nobody. even though I once had a life where I thought I was somebody. I felt strongly that this feeling somehow linked me to the people still staying on here. I took a deep, steadying breath in the shadows of the barn, turned to the sunlight, and walked toward the woman. As I approached, she did not stir. She seemed locked in place, entranced by something. Once I reached the crest of the hill, I saw that she was looking down on an arena where, amidst a whirl of dust clouds, a man was working with what looked like a young colt. "Excuse me," I said, breaking her trance. She turned to me, and under the brim of her considerable hat, she wore a smile. This woman was much older than I would have expected for someone who owned a horse farm. Much too old to ride without breaking a fragile bone. She was delicate. Her skin was paper thin, peach and luminescent, so transparent that I could see the blue blood working through the veins in her hands. Her clothing was exquisite, and each skinny finger bore a glimmering bauble. She was the perfect Southern belle. Her gossamer white sheath of a dress clung to her slight, frail body, spilling over the edge of the picnic table, fluttering on the light, humid breeze. I couldn't help but think that I might break her if I spoke too loudly. When she finally addressed me, it was in a sweet, low, musical voice. "I just love it when he starts working with the young ones." She met my eyes. Hers were cloudy blue sapphires, cloaked by the soft wrinkles that accompanied well-cared-for elder skin. I was taken aback by her beauty. Age had been good to her. Straining to see, I squinted down into the arena. I was shocked that she could see what the man was doing down there until I noticed the pocket-sized pair of binoculars hidden under the palm of her right hand. I offered my hand to her and introduced myself. "I'm Devin Brooke, ma'am." She reached out to me with her dainty, crooked fingers and gave me a squeeze. "I'm Sophia Matilda Washington Clark. Please just call me Sophia. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, dear? Maybe you can start with why you're here," she said inquisitively. "Here it is. My window of opportunity. It's now or never, Devin." I felt ready. The clerk at the local tax store warned me that I'd only have one chance to convince her to take on a boarder. I practiced what I would say at this moment over and over. It began with cricket, skipped over Michael, covered the moment of enlightenment in front of the horse pasture, and ended with finding faith. This is it. I crossed my fingers behind my back and silently prayed I deliver a good pitch. Chapter 5. "So that's how I came to learn about Greenbrier, Sophia," I said nervously, wiping my brow. Sophia pursed her time-lined lips, cocked her head in thought. She considered me for quite some time. "Please say yes. Please say yes." Finally, she spoke. "You can keep your horse here," she said, nodding. "You seem like a very nice girl. I'm intrigued by your story." "Devin, you can stop holding your breath now." She looked me up and down, narrowing her eyes as she surveyed me. She spoke sweetly again, but had a slight sound of hurt in her voice as she continued. "Just mind your P's and Q's. Don't mean we aren't a friendly bunch, but we are a pretty private group around here. I take it that's what you're looking for, though." "Oh, yes, ma'am," I said, trying not to sound desperate. I wanted this place. I wanted to suck in all of its secrecy and make it my own. I didn't want to have to explain my life, my breakup, my breakdown, my missed years of horse knowledge. I wanted to be part of the private bunch, yet separate, alone. "And don't bother with him either." She jetted her chin toward the arena. I was shocked. I didn't want to bother with any hymns. You don't have to worry about that, ma'am. I will be sure to keep to myself out here. Well, I believe you, dear. But just so you know. She paused to emphasize her point. He is a cowboy through and through. He breaks his horses, and then he breaks hearts, 6 ways sideways. Done it to everyone out here. He'll do it to someone new, too. Sophia sighed. It was a breathy, heavy sigh. I wanted to bottle it and sell it. It sounded so pretty. I have a soft spot for him, so I let him keep on here, but he takes a little piece of my heart every time he goes. I can't help adoring him, but I've learned after all these years not to count on the cowboy types. I didn't know what kind of confession she was sharing with me. I wanted to ask her what she meant by when he goes, but I remembered her instructions to mind my P's and Q's. I wasn't about to throw away the perfect place for faith in me over a question about some guy that I didn't care to know standing a 1/4 mile away in an arena. I looked at the ground and swiped my boot across the blades of grass, watching each one snap back into place, tall, reaching for the sun. So I'll have her shipped in tomorrow then? She gave me a single nod and turned back to the arena. She must have heard him approaching. I was either too excited about Faith's new surroundings or too confused about Sophia's lecture to notice that he had made his way up the hill and heard the tail end of our conversation. He stood a few feet from me, sweaty bay horse in tow, staring at Sophia. McKinnon. She paused to acknowledge him and press her thin pink lips together. I will discuss it with you this evening. Sophia motioned toward me with both beautiful hands, the ones I couldn't stop looking at, and said, This is Devin. He turned his electric blue, weathered eyes on me and shot an untrusting glare. He shook his head, dark hair matted to his neck under a straw cowboy hat, pushed a heavy breath through his fine-lipped mouth, then clucked to the horse, cueing him forward, and disappeared over the backside of the hill toward the barn. I couldn't help but watch him walk away, thin white shirt stuck to his sweaty back and molded to his wiry muscular frame. He was statuesque in the sunlight, a willing horse at his beck and call, anger evident in every step he took. I wondered after him for a moment, and then shook my head free. Not my problem. About the author. Carly Kade is an Arizona-based author and enjoys competitively showing her registered paint horse. In her free time, Carly works on her next novel, reads voraciously, spends time with her husband and 2 adopted dogs, and loves exploring the great outdoors. Feeling social? Join the herd and connect with Carly Kade Creative on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter. Can't wait to find out what happens next for McKinnon and Devin? Visit Carly's blog at carlykadecreative.com for sequel sneak peeks, updates, and release info. Reviews are golden. If you enjoyed this book, please leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads. Your readership and support is greatly appreciated. The end.